All right. So in today's lesson, let's talk about what argument is. I think it's important for us to understand what argument is first, especially early on right now, because all the things that we're doing are gearing us up toward writing the persuasive paper or the argumentative paper. Those words are interchangeable. And so what I want to do is I want to take some time and talk about what argument is so that we know exactly where we're going and what we're doing. So when we talk about argument, we're talking about making your point. What is argument? Argument is not a quarrel. It's not a fight. It's not an argument. It's not two people standing nose to nose, toe to toe, about to throw fists or something. What it is, it's a stand on an issue. It is your position on the issue, what you believe when it comes to this topic. Now, if you have a stand on an issue and if your argument is valid, you have to be aware that there is a valid viewpoint on the opposite or lots of other sides. If yours is the only valid viewpoint, then you're not arguing anything, okay? So there has to be something that you're arguing towards. And you have to understand that other people have valid positions. Now, you don't have to agree with them. You don't have to like them, but you do have to understand that other people have valid points. I think that also goes to civility. And I know a lot of times, when people get in arguments, they get mad and they get frustrated and they yell and whatever, because they just can't see that other people could believe something different. In a true argument, there is a valid point on the other side. And argument is something in which you plan to persuade people on. So it's not just informing people or, hey, here's something that's going on, or here's some information I want to share with you. Argument really is, the point of argument is making sure that other people, that you're trying to get other people to change their mind, or maybe they already have the same position as you and they just want to increase that or strengthen that position. Where do we see argument? Commonly, it's used in politics. Obviously, when they say, this is the plan, this is why we want to do it, and this is why you should believe in this is why you should vote for me, this is why you should support this policy. We see it a lot in reviews. Eat at this restaurant, watch this movie, read this book, where people are saying, hey, here's something that's good or bad and why. And then, of course, advertising. And all advertising is argument, because they are trying to get you to support the product or to buy the product or to believe in that brand. And so there's always that sense of argument. Anything that you want to argue must be research-based. Okay, you have to have plenty of information to really back up your position. And anything that you are arguing, because you understand there is a opposite viewpoint, you can't be offended when others disagree with you. So when it comes to argument, there's several things to keep in mind. And again, we've talked about most of these, so it's not, I'm just going to kind of refresh your memory just a little bit. Obviously, we have to match the audience's needs when it comes to language and what they need to hear. We're going to talk more about the importance of support and how you have to really back up what you're saying. We'll talk more about fallacies as well, but you want to make sure that you're giving good information in a logical, fair, and accurate manner. And then, we've talked about this, many, many times before, about audience and purpose and how you really put those pieces together to really show, to really formulate your argument into a very effective vehicle to get your point across. When it comes to supporting your point, reasoning is very important. We've talked about reasoning, inductive and deductive reasoning. That's how you walk your audience through an argument, how you get them to think about things, okay? So that's very important, because you need to show them the logical process that you use to get to your conclusion. And I think it's very important that they need to see it, that evidence. They need to see the proof. They need to see how and why this is real, and how and why this is valid and good arguments. And then conviction. There's a lot to be said about conviction, because the more conviction you show, the more passion that you show for the topic, that's infectious. Your audience buys into it. When you're excited about something, when you're really into it, when you're really pitching it, when you're really passionate about it and you're excited and you're really going for it, that's infectious. And so when you are arguing your position, you want to really show that conviction. In our situation, because this is written, not spoken, a lot of that conviction is going to come with things like, using superlative. This is the most, this is the best, this is, the worst case scenario. Any of those things, when you can really show how excited or passionate you are about it, that's where you're really going to get other people to start buying into it. And then connection with the audience. And again, we've talked before about how you want your audience to really buy into something. You really need to show how it impacts them, how it's meaningful to them, how they can see it. If it's something they don't really get, if they don't really understand it, you're going to have to show how it's going to come close to home, or how they're part of that problem. And we've already talked about inductive and deductive reasoning. Again, these are things that I don't anticipate seeing in your paper at all. Deductive reasoning is that major premise, minor premise, conclusion. Here's a specific rule that we all buy into, and here is an example or a situation. So when we apply that rule to the situation, we get a conclusion. And inductive reasoning is where we take all the facts and figures and data that we can find on something, and we kind of distill it down, and we look for those patterns, and we come up with a conclusion. Some of the historical terms that we use when we talk about argument that you'll see in your book: claims, those are your assertions. Those are those kinds of ways that you're trying to explain your position, right? Appeals, those are how you connect to the audience. That's how you draw the audience in. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Reasoning, we've already talked about. That's how you logically walk your audience through the process. And then argument, again, like what we said earlier, that is your position. That's where you stand on the issue. Let's talk a little bit about appeals. There are three basic types of appeals: logic, emotion, or ethics. You'll also hear it called logos for logic, pathos for emotions, or ethos for ethics. The basic assumption is that appeals are how you draw the audience in, how you show the audience that this is or should be important to them. The basic level, or the first level, and this is the one where a lot of people will act, will be that logical appeal. So that's where you give your audience facts and figures and numbers and statistics so that they really buy into something, where they really show this is solid, good information. The thing about logical appeals are that they are very solid, but only after the audience has evaluated that information. The audience has to go through, they have to really digest that information. They really have to think about that information, evaluate it, maybe do their own research to verify that information that you're providing. Now, it's very strong that once somebody buys into an argument logically or through a logical appeal, then it's a very strong, but it's a slow process, and it really makes the reader do a lot of the work on their side. The second appeal, and this is again a very common one, is pathos or emotions. And this is where we try to engage the audience on an emotional level with their heart. So if logic is through the brain, emotions or pathos is through the heart. And this is where we get you to feel happy, sad, scared, nervous, afraid. We want you to buy into patriotism, and we want to buy into this fear of needing to be part of something. Emotion is that thing, that raw, kind of visceral, gut level reaction to something. If you think about commercials, like when you see the animal cruelty ads, there's always these pictures of these cute, adorable puppies and cats that are just scarred up, or they're scared, or they just look really beat down. And they say, hey, why don't you send us the price of a cup of coffee a day, and we could take care of these animals. So that's a combination of pathos and logos. We get the audience emotionally engaged with that heart, and then we give them that logical information to really, kind of 1-2 punch that information home. When we say logic is slow because the audience has to be very active and they have to really evaluate that information that they're seeing, pathos or emotions is very fast because it is a gut level reaction. It's a quick, visceral, gut level reaction to something. The problem is that it doesn't stay long. If you think about like when you get really mad about something, you're just fired up and you're spitting nails. A couple hours later, you're not nearly as mad. And the next day, it's a lot less. And we see that with emotions because if you get somebody emotionally engaged on a topic, it's very hard to keep them emotionally engaged for long periods of time. That's why you have to come back and engage them with those facts or those logic. Excuse me. The third type of appeal is ethics. And this is twofold. One is your sense of right or wrong, good or bad, just or unjust. Your sense of ethics. Now, that's a really hard one to get people to buy into because we all have similar beliefs, but we all believe in a lot of different kinds of stuff, right? So ethics, is good because, I think that there are a lot of commonalities, but there's so many little shades and variations that it's kind of hard to nail a person's ethics down beyond just this is good or this is bad. The real place where we see ethos or ethics is through the sense of authority. When a famous or trusted person says something, like your parents, when they said something, you tended to believe it, at least when you're really young. And then you had those high school years where you just refused to believe anything, right? And then later on, you started to re-believe those parents because they're people you trusted. They had authority. You knew they were saying something. If your doctor says something, they have authority. And so you tend to believe what they say. And again, if you can get like a really a trusted person to say something, a lot of your audience will buy into it through that ethos. Let's talk about supporting your argument or really proving your point. Again, whenever you start with, here's what I believe, and you're trying to get other people to buy into it, either to change their mind or to really strengthen their own position, you have to show beyond a shadow of a doubt, overwhelmingly, this is a good point. This is the right answer. This is the best option, right? So you have to be very convincing. You have to be you have to be full of conviction. You have to be very passionate about it. You have to really believe in it. You have to provide just more information than what you need for a person to buy into it. You just want to make sure. Now, obviously, at some point it's overkill, but you need to give people more than they need to buy into something. And you're going to do that by providing lots and lots of credible source material. When we look at source material, when we look at the information that you're going to use to prove your point, to provide support, we really can break it into three pieces: facts, examples, and illustrations. Facts are discrete pieces of information, the basic pieces of information. For instance, if I say 7 out of 10 people involved in a motor vehicle accident while wearing their seatbelt survive, okay, that's a fact. That is a piece of information that you could go out and you could verify. You could, prove. You could verify. You could, double check. You could internalize and buy into. Okay. But the thing is that a fact is oftentimes a very basic piece of information. It doesn't mean much to people. So what you want to do is you want to take that fact and you want to put it into a real world context. You want to put it into a piece of information that people get, that will make sense to people, that it becomes an example. For instance, if I say 7 out of 10 people involved in a motor vehicle accident while wearing their seatbelts survive. If I use that as a fact, I could go around the room and count how many people are in the room, and 70% of them would be the survivors. I could say last year there were X number of motor vehicle accidents. That means that probably this many survived. Or in the city of Evansville, or in the city, the state of Indiana, or whatever. I could go through and take that discrete fact, but show it how that really means, what that really comes down to. Or if I really want to make it believable and really want to make it to where people buy into it, I can put a human face on it. I can make it an illustration. And that's where I take and make it human and real for people that they can relate to, they can empathize with that, right? For instance, I could say if 7 out of 10 people survive, I can count the number of people in the room. I could also say that's Billy Joe. Billy Joe was involved in a motor vehicle accident last year. He was wearing a seatbelt. His car rolled over 16 times down an embankment. It did this, this, and this. Yes, he did suffer some injuries, but he was able to survive and recover, and is living basically a normal, productive life now. So when I put a human face on it, then it becomes something that people can feel for, not only just see it, but they can feel for them as well. Facts are basic, examples are good, but really take it and put a human face on it with the illustrations. Those are the best. And we oftentimes see those illustrations in the introductions or in the transition from point to point.